What if I told you that your mind is not free, not in the way you think it is? You may believe you control your thoughts, your reactions, your emotions. But watch closely the next time someone disrespects you, or a plan falls apart, or life denies you what you want. Watch how fast control slips away. That is the illusion of freedom. Most people don't live sovereign lives. They live as mental captives, prisoners of impulses, slaves to emotion, owned by opinion. They mistake noise for clarity and distraction for direction. They scroll endlessly, consume thoughtlessly, react instantly, and call it living. What they really do is hand their inner kingdom over to everything outside them. The Stoics had it as the greatest tragedy of man, not death, but domination by what he should rule. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That was not poetry. That was a weapon, a reminder that sovereignty begins and ends in the mind. But here is the brutal truth. Most of us never train for that. We train our bodies, our careers, our image, but our minds, we leave them unguarded, open to every passing opinion, every fear, every lie that says, "You are not enough." And so, unintentionally, we become subjects to our own weakness. We follow our moods like orders. We give away our peace to strangers. We allow temporary feelings to rewrite permanent truths. That is not freedom, that is slavery. The music becomes deeper now, low drums, like a heartbeat starting. The Stoic Playbook begins here, in rebellion. The revolt against mental dependence. It's the moment you stop living by reaction and start living by principle, because the world will always try to own you through fear, through noise, through comfort. But sovereignty means you no longer bow to any of it. And understand this, sovereignty doesn't mean coldness or detachment. It means being the calm center in chaos, feeling everything yet ruled by nothing, walking into life with your own compass, while others drift in every direction. This is not an easy path. Mental sovereignty requires discipline sharper than any sword. It requires you to look at yourself with ruthless honesty. The Stoics called this prosik attention to the self, a daily practice in which you watch your mind, scan each and every thought before it forms into action, and filter each and every emotion before it forms into a decision. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and that mastery begins by realizing you are not your thoughts. You are the thinker. You are not your emotions. You are the observer. The moment you separate the two, you begin to rule. Music rises, faint choral tones. Consider the most powerful empire in the world, not Rome, not Greece, but that within your skull. Every decision, every reaction, every word spoken from that throne shapes your reality. But who sits upon that throne right now? Your discipline or your distraction? Your purpose or your pain? It is not a gift, but it is earned through practice, restraint, and awareness. It is built in the moments no one sees when you want to react, but you breathe instead when you want to run, but you stay when you want to speak, but silence serves you better. That is the first law of the Stoic Playbook. Command your inner state before the world commands it for you. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, plague, war, and the death of his children, and ruled with grace. He didn't control fate. He controlled himself within it. That is what makes a person unbreakable. The weak are controlled by circumstances. The wise master control the response. And that is the first step to mental sovereignty, realizing that the battle is never out there. It is right here. Now in the mind that chooses meaning over misery, principle over panic, and peace over pride. Music swells gently, a sound of transformation. From this moment forward, you are no longer reacting to life. You are writing it. You are not a victim of thought. You are its architect. You are not ruled by the storm. You are the calm in it. This is where sovereignty begins. In silence, awareness, and choice. Knowing is not the same as embodying. Most people understand control in theory. yet they collapse in practice. They quote Marcus Aurelius, hang Seneca on their walls, repeat Epictetus like a prayer. Yet, whenever life cuts them deep, they crumple like paper. Why? Because philosophy isn't about words. It is about training. Because for the Stoics, it wasn't about just thinking differently. It was about living differently. To them, life was a war, and the mind was a fortress. Each and every moment was a drill. Each challenge, a sparring partner. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He was exposing a truth most never confront. The mind invents more pain than the world delivers. We rehearse failure before it arrives. We build fear into catastrophe. We lose before the battle even begins. The Stoic Playbook for mental sovereignty starts with breaking that pattern, because if your mind can create suffering, it can also birth strength. And perception is the weapon for that transformation. Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He wasn't being rhetorical, he was being quite literal. Every obstacle is neutral, until you label it. Every difficulty is powerless, until you give it meaning. The weak perceive pain and shrink away from it. The sovereign sees pain and studies it. The weak ask, "Why me?" The sovereign asks, "What for?" The weak complain that life is hard. The sovereign train harder. Here is the brutal truth. You will never be free until you face the weight you've been avoiding. Comfort has become the new captivity. People want easy routines, predictable outcomes, soft emotions. They build their lives to feel safe. And in doing so, they forget how to feel strong. The Stoics did the opposite. They practiced voluntary discomfort, premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of hardship. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that freedom is not the absence of chains, but rather mastery of reaction. You can own nothing and still be sovereign if you own your mind. Mental sovereignty means you prepare for difficulty before it strikes. You don't wait for the pain to come to learn discipline. You build discipline so the pain finds you ready. That is why Seneca slept on hard floors, ate plain bread, and wore rough clothes. Not because he wanted to suffer, but because he wanted to stay free. He knew that if your peace is controlled by luxury, then the absence of it means that peace will leave instantly. Ask yourself, what owns your peace right now? Is it money? Is it approval? Is it certainty? Whatever owns your calm owns your mind. The Stoic Playbook says this: let go before the world rips things from you. Train before the test arrives. If you can endure the loss in your imagination, you can survive it in life. A person who rehearses chaos is never shocked when chaos arrives. This is not pessimism, it is preparation. You don't visualize loss to suffer twice. You visualize it to remain unshaken when life takes what it always does. People, comfort, stability. Marcus Aurelius buried his children, faced betrayal from friends, governed during plague. And yet, he wrote of kindness, patience, and control. That's not because he was emotionless. It's because he ruled his emotions instead of being ruled by them. Stoics taught that emotion is not weakness, but reaction is you are allowed to feel. You are meant to feel. But feelings were never meant to command you. They're just signals and not orders. Mental sovereignty arises when you feel fully yet decide consciously. Somebody insults you. You feel the sting, yet you don't reply with rage. You observe the pain, yet you let it pass. You question yourself, does this deserve my peace? And in that question, you take back your throne. That is where mastery lives. Not in suppressing the fire, but in directing it. You see, every emotion has power if harnessed correctly. Anger, if refined, becomes focus. Fear, if understood, becomes awareness. Sadness, if accepted, becomes depth. But let them lead when untrained, and they'll be your rulers. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Because growth isn't glamorous. It's humiliating. It's silent. It's daily. The Stoic trains without applause, Because sovereignty doesn't need validation. Every day, the Stoic practices stillness even when his mind screams. He trains patience in traffic, gratitude in discomfort, silence in conflict. Every little effort of self-control is a brick in the fortress of sovereignty. When the average person explodes, the Stoic breathes. When the crowd panics, the Stoic pauses. When life tests him, he whispers, "Good." Not as denial, but as declaration. For the sovereign knows, the harder the test, the sharper the blade. So how do you start building this kind of power? You start small. You begin where you are. You choose one discomfort each day and you meet it head on. Cold water, hard conversation, early morning, long silence. The point isn't pain, the point is proof. Proof that you can choose discipline over impulse. Every act of self-mastery whispers a new truth. I am in control. That is the essence of the Stoic Playbook: choice. The only freedom that can't ever get taken away. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, restraint over chaos, effort over ease, you win another inch of sovereignty. You don't wait for peace to come. You become peace. You don't beg for strength. You train it. You don't fear loss. You rehearse it. And when life finally comes for you, as it always does, you will not break. You will stand calm, ready, unshaken. For the mind that is trained in Stoicism is not only free, it is untouchable. There is a war that rages inside every human being, the war of identity. Not of name or job or title, but the deeper one, the identity of the mind. Who are you when everything else is taken away? Who are you when nobody's watching, the applause stops, and everything you built starts to shake? The Stoics called this the true battlefield, the self. Because before you can lead, you must first command the person within, and before you can command, you must know who that person is. Most people don't. People spend their whole lives in masks, part of the noise, performing for likes and applause. They build their sense of self on things that can disappear in an instant: money, validation, status, good looks. And when those disappear, so do they. But the Stoic, the sovereign, builds identity on what cannot be taken. Principles. Epictetus was born a slave and taught emperors. Never once did the chains touch his soul because he refused to give them power over him. He famously said, "You are a little soul carrying around a corpse." That is to say, you are not your possessions, not your image, not your pain. You are the mind interpreting it all. This is the third law of the Stoic Playbook. Define yourself before the world does. Because if you don't, the world will hand you an identity, one that serves its agenda, not your soul. It will call you your failures. It will call you your fears. It will call you your mistakes, your past, your limits. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing it. The Stoic refuses that. He defines who he is with values, not outcomes. I will be honest, even if it cost me, he says. I will be calm even when the world is not. With every choice, he carves his identity in stone, unshakable, untouchable, sovereign. Identity is not what you say you are. It is what you repeatedly do when things get hard. But the paradox is that for building yourself, you need to face what is breaking you. That is not weakness. That is power, because awareness is the first weapon of sovereignty. The modern mind fears silence because silence reveals truth. That is where you start reclaiming it. Every disappointment that once broke you was actually revealing you. Every betrayal that crushed your trust was showing you who was worth it. Every failure that humbled you was clearing space for wisdom. You will never achieve mental sovereignty until you accept your past as your greatest teacher. You can't rule your mind if you still see your history as your enemy. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every fall, they weren't punishments. They were training, because the universe doesn't test the strong. It creates them, he says. This happened for me, to forge me. And that shift, that small, subtle shift in meaning, is the foundation of self-command. That is what mental sovereignty means. You take back the right to the story. The world can label you, insult you, doubt you. But if you know who you are, You'll move like water through every wall, because confidence that is built on truth can't be touched. Real power. It is not about dominance. It is a detachment from identity built upon illusion. But first, stop letting others define your peace. Stop explaining your journey to people who haven't walked it. Stop fighting to be understood by minds that don't understand themselves. Be still. Define yourself. Act from that definition, not from doubt, not from fear, not from noise. And when you find it, nothing can move you again. If you want to know the heart of Stoicism, understand this: sovereignty does not come from control. It comes from freedom, from needing control. The more you try to command the external world, people, events, outcomes, the more enslaved you become to its fluctuations. The Stoic understood that the moment you tie your peace to anything you cannot fully govern, you hand over your crown. Epictetus taught this law simply: some things are in our control, and some things are not. That's it. That's the dividing line between chaos and calm, between the ruled and the ruler. Every time you cross that line, you suffer. Every time you stay on your side of it, you grow stronger. Modern life makes this harder than ever. We are flooded with things that demand reaction, opinions, trends, headlines, notifications, judgments. The world is built to provoke you, to keep you entangled, to feed on your attention. And when you react to everything, you lose yourself. Music deepens, steady and grounding, like slow waves. Mental sovereignty begins when you stop playing that game, when you pause instead of reacting, when you decide where your attention goes, when you accept what is beyond your reach and give everything to what is within it. You can't control how other people act, but you can control whether you meet them with integrity. You cannot control what tomorrow brings, but you can control how prepared you are to meet it. You can't control whether people love you, but you can control whether you act from love. The Stoic doesn't waste his energy trying to predict or please the world. He channels it into mastery of what he can influence: thought, choice, and response. That is the Stoic triangle. The boundaries of power. Step outside of them, and you scatter your strength. Stay within them, and you become untouchable. Think about how much of your life has been spent fighting what cannot be changed, resenting what already happened, worrying about what might, chasing approval that will never satisfy. Every ounce of that energy could have been used to build your mind into something powerful, calm, disciplined. The Stoic doesn't resist reality. He collaborates with it. He understands that the universe is not his servant, it is his teacher. Every frustration is a lesson in patience. Every loss, a reminder of impermanence. Every insult, a test of restraint. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, "You will find comfort." He said strength, because sovereignty doesn't come from ease. It comes from understanding where your true influence lies. The moment you stop clinging to outcomes is the moment you start winning in a new way. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you refuse to drown in what you can't control. The Stoic still works hard, still loves deeply, still fights fiercely. But he does all of it without the poison of attachment. He does it for virtue, not validation. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means you no longer need everything to go your way. The sovereign mind can walk through fire because it has accepted fire as part of the path. You see, control is an illusion that weakens you. The more you grasp for it, the more fragile you become. But when you let go, when you stop demanding that life obey your expectations, you begin to discover a paradoxical truth: letting go is the highest form of power, because you cannot be broken by what you've already accepted. The Stoic Playbook calls this practice amorphati, the love of fate, not tolerance of it, not endurance of it. Love. The sovereign mind doesn't just accept what happens. It embraces it as fuel. It says, "If this is my path, I will walk it with dignity. If this is my challenge, I will grow through it. If this is my pain, I will learn from it." That is not passive acceptance, that is active mastery. When Marcus Aurelius was confronted with plague, betrayal, war, and loss, he didn't fold. He looked at each event and inquired, "What is this training me for?" He knew that every hardship was an opportunity to hone his reason, harden his virtue, and enrich his peace. Ask yourself, how much of your suffering comes not from what happened, but from your resistance to it? How many storms did you turn into hurricanes by fighting what you couldn't change? The Stoic knows that resistance magnifies pain, acceptance transforms it. You are not asked to enjoy the pain. You are asked to use it. Because when you can say thank you to the hard moments, not out of submission, but out of strength, you transcend them. That is detachment. That is sovereignty. The storm still rages, but you are no longer inside it. You are the mountain it breaks against. The Stoic doesn't live by luck, or by fear, or by emotion. He lives by principle when things go well. He practices gratitude. When things go wrong, he practices endurance. Either way, he wins. That is the formula hidden in plain sight. You can't lose if you play the right game. The game isn't about avoiding difficulty. It is about mastering yourself through it. The Stoic stops trying to win in the world's way. He wins in his own. Mental sovereignty is not about controlling life. It is about living so that life can no longer control you. It is about walking into every situation with the same calm thought. I cannot control this, but I can control myself. And when the realization becomes instinct, you no longer react, you respond. You no longer flinch, you flow. You no longer fear, you act. That is the Stoic way. That is freedom. There is a strength that doesn't come from muscles, money, or momentum. It comes from solitude. The modern world fears it, rushes to fill it. But the Stoic seeks it, because in solitude, the noise fades, and what is left is the truth. You see, most people run from being alone, not because they dislike the silence, but because they dislike the confrontation that comes with it. When everything external disappears, you can't hide behind distraction anymore. You are forced to face yourself, your thoughts, your patterns, your fears, your emptiness, and for many, that is terrifying. But the Stoic regards solitude as a mirror, the only place where he can study himself without distortion. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving." But he also added, "When you withdraw into yourself,